Good afternoon to all of you. We are starting our second session. Actually, we were planning to start this session and finish it before the lunchtime itself, but it got a little bit late. So we have two eminent speakers for this session. The first session is done by Mr. Pushkar Ganesh Vaidya, and the second session is by Mr. Karthik Raghavendran. I request both the panelists to stick to our time of 20 minutes. So I would like to welcome Mr. Pushkar Ganesh Vaidya to address as the first speaker. Mr. Pushkar Ganesh Vaidya is one of the world's leading scientists in the field of astrobiology. As we know, astrobiology is the study of the origin, evolution, and distribution of life in the universe. So he began his career as a scientist in 2001, founded the Indian Astrobiology Research Center in 2006 in Mumbai. He also heads the Center for United Nations, a major group organization with UN with an international scope of work related to sustainable development. Mr. Pushkar Ganesh Vaidya.
Well, good afternoon, everybody. And we are going to start with something to do with the role of yoga in space exploration. And listening to a couple of, the way the stage has been set, for it, I believe it will be very interesting to, set an entirely different framework, how we must be doing yoga. So I work in space, space research. In particular, we look for life outside Earth. And part of that tells us something very interesting. And it is this sort of stuff. It's something which you must have seen on Google. If you just type the word universe, this sort of shows up. What sometimes is not always registered, because we're always so busy, if you like, is that the union which we are seeking, through all this yoga, it is already there. It is just that we have forgotten. And I say this with little knowledge of yoga, but little more knowledge of cosmology. Because, so where you see the beginning, the Big Bang about 13 odd billion years ago, and that's our present best guess. So cosmology and precision doesn't go together, so we keep on changing, here and there. But the point is this. In my hand is a 5 rupee coin. There was a famous cover from the Discover magazine, I think it was April 2001 somewhere, and they had this size of the universe. So I want to give this audience a very empirical feeling that the union which we are seeking is already there. It is perhaps we are not realizing is because everything that we can think of, including you and me and this whole auditorium and India and planet Earth and the galaxies and all of that came from a point something like this. This actually about 10 to minus 27 seconds after the Big Bang. So quite literally you and I were inside this size and we all came from there. So what is the union we are seeking? We are already united. We have forgotten in a way. So perhaps yoga is just going to make us realize, and it's a very important realization because this disparity which was being spoken about, it is not true. Spirituality and science are exactly the same. It's just that, we forgot somewhere. So well, I'll put the universe with me for a while. And this is what we look at now. So we explore the outer space and the inner space. So if I want to do outer space, I go for space exploration. If I want to go for the inner space, I'm supposed to do yoga as if the two are different. And this is creating a lot of unnecessary tussle, that as the two, they are not different. And then, as we go ahead, we'll see how they are not only not different, how they must realize that they are not different. So if I want to do space exploration today, it starts with the fact that it's very risky. It's risky business. Even Elon Musk would know it's risky in a very economic way, and it's risky in a very biological way, because one of the things which can happen in space very quickly is that you can just die. And dying is not a very good idea in space because you have already, there's a lot of money riding on you. So you want to go to space and be alive and explore. So for the inner space, of course, we can do this yoga sort of thingy, but for the outer space, there is a role for yoga and much more. So, nowadays it's not asked, but let's say about 60, 70 odd years ago, they would ask, why do we do space exploration? What is the need? Why can't we just feed the poor and so on? Well, today, much of the United Nations humanitarian efforts are only possible because of space-based technology. I mean, the fact that we are here, we're having the mobile phones is only because of that we have space technology. So, I mean, this case is done, but all I'm trying to tell you is that there's a reason space exploration must be done, because there's no other way it can happen if we want to progress, that is. And this is where it all changed. So this is 1968, Apollo 8, and they are still to land on the moon. And till then, we don't exactly know who we are, in the sense that we had never seen our own planet from outside. This is the first time it happens. We see where we come from. This is our planet. In a very, in a very, how should I put it? In a very Western way, it was, it was put down as it's a pale blue dot, the insignificance of it all. In my yogic way, it is the significance of it all. And that approach is very different. And that's what, that's what the case is going to be made for the role of yoga. Because when this happened, thereafter this happened. So if you see, you have the moon landing in 69. You have the first Earth Day declared in 1970. Then you have the Doctors Without Borders coming in. You have the United Nations University in 1972, followed by the United Nations UNEP, the Environment Program. Of course, I got this from one of the lectures of Neil deGrasse Tyson, because the way it is shaped up, we don't realize that the trigger, was not from here. We couldn't figure out we have to save our planet. When we saw it from outside, we realized, wow, this is how it must be. So why space? Because that's exactly where we come from. That's who we are actually. We are the universe. We are not different from the universe. And if you to undertake space travel, it is generally put down as it's risky, primarily because you have these radiation issues, microgravity issues, and isolation. Now, I don't know many yogis who don't like to be isolated, for example. So this how can yoga help? Yeah, well, we'll find out soon. But look at this, in fact, 50% of astronauts are likely to be affected by structural changes in the brain's post-space flights. We are literally changing once we go to space. And what is the defense we have? Well, before we get there, this is more like it. So you have this microgravity, because see, all of us, including the bacteria and the dog, we are basically here for about 3.1, 3.8 billion years ago, depending upon what the biologists think when life started. Each one of us is from 1G, 1 gravity, and once we move outside, the whole thing changes. We have radiation issues. So we have certain extremophiles, who somehow behave as if they can tackle the radiation. So we have, but isolation is something very, very interesting, because once we are disconnected from people, we somehow just fall ill. And that is such a important thing, because when you go to space, you're not only alone, you are also confined in space. Now, much of what you're seeing here is, of course, I'm citing research papers, below, and as Dr. Manjunath indicated earlier, it's very important that we do not cite from the so-called Beale's list or the predatory journals or those sort of things, because that's one of the things which is, making this whole thing unnecessarily not important. So, in very my space exploration way, if I take the fastest spacecraft that I have today with the New Horizons, and if I just take the distance like a crow flies, if I go to different planets, it takes quite some time. In actuality, if I want to go Mars, it will take about 6 months more than that, simply because I want to save the fuel. But if I want to go straight, well, this kind of speeds we are, time zones we are looking at. If I want to go to the edge of this solar system, we are looking at about 14,000 years. So, no meaningful space exploration is possible without something else joining this whole effort. There are no answers from technology coming, because 14,000 years is quite some time. The only option you have is to increase the speed at which you can travel, and that is unfortunately not a very promising situation we are in. Because even if you travel, let's say at 1% the speed of light, which is at almost the edge of technology what we can think of as of today, you are going to take hundreds of years to just go to the closest star systems. This is just, in an area where just how do we do it? Even if you travel at the speed of light, let's say, forget the 1%, we go at the speed of light and we go to Andromeda. Now that is going to take a long, long time, about 2 odd million years. So we are talking numbers, this is just gone. So even for near-Earth space exploration, how are we going to do it? Where are the answers? And to add to all of this, of course, we have to stay alive as, as human beings. So how do we tackle, these risks of human health in space? The standard answer, of course, is space medicine, which is, the way the Western medicine, if you like, the allopathic medicine, which is doing, of course, wonderful jobs, because I do not see anyone running into an Ayurvedic hospital in emergency. They always go to the emergency of the allopathic hospitals. So, of course, it works. But the problem is very different here. And the issue is money and technology coming in. So we can do this allopathy business here. You can do an fMRI and stuff like that. What do we do if we go outside in space? Now it is not only costly, it is almost impossible to do it. And why do we do all this? I mean, just to be clear, why bother to do all this? Of course, the answer is, as is always is, there's a lot of money there. The space industry is about $400 billion. It's expected to reach about $1 trillion by 2030. Now that's a lot of money. It's the fastest growing industry ever in the human history. And it's an industry which is talking of figures like about 100 trillion if we go space mining. Now 100 trillion is 20 trillion more than the entire global economy. People are interested, and that's where yoga is going to come in, because someone is interested, somebody has challenges. The space industry has a challenge to solve. If I want to do a surgery in space, it has never been done before. Anesthesia, we don't know. The bacteriums behave differently, the molecules behave differently. What do we do? So this is, of course, space medicine challenges. So to address these space medicine challenges, we have one option to offer. And perhaps there cannot be a better option. Perhaps there is none. And that option will be yoga. So we explore the role of yoga in space exploration because I cannot understand why it is not there already. Perhaps because we are in, we are just in 2000, it's a wounded civilizations, 800 years, we are taught in a certain way, but perhaps the time has come. And, the foundation stone set today is perhaps the beginning of a new world order. And let me be, very blunt about this one, that a new world order is never run by playing by someone else's rules. The problem right now is that we have a Western scientific method which is structuring things in such a way that I have to fit in and I cannot fit everything in. Do we have another way? I'm sure we do. It is just go through yoga, but the point is a new world order can never be set by playing by someone else's rules. And that's what is happening as of now. There's a lot to learn from those rules, but the time has come to change that. And, well, a very well-known thing. This is Swami Turiyanandaji, one of the 12 famous disciples of Ramakrishna. So Sri Ramakrishna's disciple, he had a surgery without anesthesia. So the question is, what do we prefer? We prefer astronauts who require all sorts of stuff, to be anesthetized and so on and so forth, or do we want astronauts who can just withdraw their mind and a procedure can be done? Do we have a solution? Of course we have a solution. Here it is, here is the documented solution. What are we waiting for? Disease-free in space. There is a guy called Wim Hof, a Dutch yogi. He went to the Himalayas after a very challenging episode in his personal life. He comes back, he learns a technique from some Himalayan yogi. He, of course, is now his guru. He comes back and teaches that method. And after that, now this again in peer-reviewed journals, he does not fall sick. He is able to control the immune response of his body. What more evidence do we want? It's not a question of one person can do it. Of course, not only one person, they did on his people who learned that method. It is already there. But I'll tell you something that is missing though. But anyway, this isolation in space. Now what happens, in space is that they did this experiments, analog experiments. They go to very, areas in Russia, and somewhere, they'll put you up, isolate you and see what happens. Each time they found isolation results in measurable pathophysiological symptoms. It literally kills you. Now, quite literally, even if I don't go to the next slide, anyone here believes that we can solve isolation, loneliness by popping pills? And don't we know what the outcome is in those very peer-reviewed journals, that how useless it is? What is the answer? Well, this is how the problems are listed. Isolation in space. All this is true. It's what happens. Who is going to space presently? There are military-grade people are going. Kalpana Chawla, Sunita Williams, these are not normal people, these are fit people, these are military people. You can't do meaningful space exploration if you want the military to go there. So you need something different. We need an entire yogic culture if we want to do space exploration. Otherwise, we can be happy by running rovers on Mars and Moon, but that's not, that's not going to satisfy the human curiosity. So we sort of know it's the best mental health solution, and how it is presented. I had one of these policies from HDFC, I believe, and I'm not so sure which company now. It's a supplementary thing. You can also do yoga. How can that be? It's like having Sachin Tendulkar in your team and say you can only do fielding. It is just ridiculous, because this is the solution. It is not being presented as one. And that's one of the challenges we have to take up when we do the space exploration thing. Because, again, these are one scoping review. It's a very small review paper, and one of a much larger review. It's a review study. They're very clear. Mindfulness intervention with an average length of 8-week duration significantly improved the population loneliness level with no mental health issue. So people are going to get better at their functioning. Even those who have psychological disorders, it is known to help. So my question is, why are astronauts not practicing yoga? What is the problem? Do you even have a solution? You do not have a solution. If you keep on sending military-grade people, they are of course already in a way genetically, let's say predisposed to be whatever, but you cannot do meaningful space exploration. So just to prove that point, we did some experiments in Mumbai for the EEG. We got some of our yogis, household yogis, to do EEG. All of them were associated with the Satsang Foundation, led by Sir Sri M. And we of course put them through, we wired them up. This was done in Jan and Feb. And well, this is what we found. So see, what I'm trying to do, I'm just trying to set the context for you. Look at that. The NASA, the head for the Human Research Program, NASA, he goes in 2015, just being an astronaut is pretty stressful because of the constant need to be able to perform at your highest possible potential. Now, the other one I have cited is about that if you're able to have theta, deep theta activity in your brains, you are able to control your emotional behavior and your susceptibility to stress goes down. I cannot understand, why are we not getting to the theta range? Why are we not testing it? Where is the data? And the data is what we try to gather. These are not done in the sense that, as Sir Sri M was saying, that we do something, wait for 10 minutes. No, not that way. Are we able to continuously go into a state of theta? If yes, then you are a good meditator. If you are a good meditator, by default, you will do tasks well. So we had these people coming, about 9 of them. We wired them up in Jan and Feb. And this is what we did. Some of them are present in this auditorium. We first did a pilot, and thereafter we did all these things, and we found something very interesting, and of course making some of us very happy, that about 5 of the 9 people displayed elevated theta wave activity. And just a few slides back, we just saw, if you can do this, you're doing really well. You can control your behavior, emotional stress responses, and so on. So yoga has to become evidence-based for sure, but it has to be for you and me to practice it. Like we test our blood pressure, why can't we already have a little bit of wearable EEGs. When you are angry, if you have a theta activity, you can show it now, how do you behave when you're angry? So there are 2 channels, 8 channels, when the technology is sort of becoming available, but the issue is, are we as yogis ready to sort of accept it and go down that line rather than saying or claiming something? So the whole idea is that yoga must create an aspirational relationship with the new generation. Why the hell should I do yoga in school? I don't fall ill. When I was till about 16 years, I don't remember that I should be falling ill. It's a very fear-based approach. Do yoga because you are stressed. How can yoga be reduced to some sort of, when it's making the claim to make you union with the universe, we have reduced it to stress-free. The whole point is there is no aspirational relationship with yoga today. Why should the child do yoga? For what reason? He's already doing well without yoga. I have done all right. I don't need yoga. But yoga must become a part of the success regimen from the very beginning. It should be from childhood. It's a part of my success. And Muralidharan, one of the legendary bowlers, in an interview with Ranveer on his show TRS, he was like, Ranveer wanted to ask, do you do yoga and meditation? He's like, I don't do it. And Ranveer was upset. He's like, why don't you do it? He's like, I don't need it. Like, how can you not need it? He's like, I'm already a wonderful bowler. Do you think I need yoga for that? So all that he meant was, it was not a part of my success regimen. You're trying to insert something. I don't want to. We need it at the school level. And why they will do it? It is because a good astronaut is a good yogi. That's why they will do it. Not because not to fall ill and become stress-free. So that's the basic point. That kids and the teams, they want to achieve goals. Yoga has to become a facilitator for these goals. Once we set that culture, we will be able to push through the collaboration of the yoga with the space industry. Because see, the issue with yoga is right now when we say, peer review papers an issue, who is watching for what? There is no money on the line, there is no skin in the game. If you tie up with a space startup, and if you say, well, yoga can do this, please do it. They have enough money to sponsor all kind of yogic research because they do not have a solution. Do we have the solution? Yes, we say so. Then prove it. Because the impetus is not there for the yogic research right now. It's just not there. We are just doing it, feel like. And that's why this collaboration is important to stimulus, what we require. And with that, an entire new generation of yogis will rise. Because they will already realize they have to become something they already are. And it will be a wonderful relationship to have. And that's sort of a statement we are looking for. This partnership is not only to prepare astronauts physically and mentally, but also propel yoga towards an evidence-based future, inspiring a new generation to embrace its practice. Because yoga, a good astronaut is a good yogi. And that's all I have to offer. All right? Thank you.
Thank you, Pushkar. We will have the question and answer session after the second speaker also concludes the session. We will have a 10 minutes exclusive interactive session after the second session is also over. Now we have eminent neuroscientist Mr. Karthik Raghavendran. He is the CEO and co-founder of Neuro Private Limited. He will be enlightening us on yoga and entrepreneurship. Dr. Karthik Raghavendran.
I have two corrections in your introduction. The number one is I'm not a doctor, and number two is enlightening the audience is a very big word. So I'll try to, and that'll be a confusion between how to define that in terms of science and yoga. So I'd like to keep it very simple. So in these 20 minutes, the topic that I'm given to talk about is yoga and entrepreneurship. And the way I have devised this 20 minutes is to talk about four things. Number one, I'd like to give a brief introduction about who am I and where do I come from and what am I doing. And number two, I'm going to take you all through some basic phases of yoga, which I wanted to define it in that way. And number three, why does a company getting into yogic practices, what does a company or entrepreneurship has to do with yoga? That's number three. And number four, what's the future of our country? And what's the future of science, technology, and yoga? And how are these three going to get married together in near future? So these four things I'll be covering, right? So on starting a note, I'd like to welcome everyone to this talk. And Anevarkum Vanakkam, and Allavakum Swagatam. I just saw it in Google, but anyways, it's really hard because I'm from Tamil Nadu. So I'd like to talk or comment on Dr. Sanjay's perspective on a three-tier approach for disease management, prevention, and maintenance. I think yoga, if I go and talk to a bunch of 50 people on trying to understand what is yoga, I would assure you I'd get 15 different definitions, right? So we need to really start with understanding what is yoga and what aspects of yoga can be applicable in our day-to-day life. So that's where I'd like to start the talk with. But before that, as I mentioned, to give you a brief introduction, I'm the co-founder and chief executive officer of a company called Neurostellar, which has so much relation to Pushkar's talk, which is on the space and the micro viewpoint, which is neurons and neuro. So we combine Neuro and Stellar, which has some resonance there. And the company is based out of IIT Madras and is around 2.8 years old. And we have been developing technologies to understand human brain and other physiological signals to give some insights on, say, mental and cognitive state, and also help a person or an individual improve on these states, right? This is a very brief definition, but I would discuss in detail as I go forward. And I also started and I'm leading a community called Neurotech X India, which has around 10,000 plus members worldwide. And you have people from Stanford, neuroscientists from Harvard, and people from Neuralink, Elon Musk's company, and different other neurotech corporations as well. And I'm a Business World 30 under 30 recipient, and I also have given, recently around 6 months back, gave a talk on TEDx, which has so much relation to the talk that I'm going to give right now. The talk was more about neuroscience and trying to answer the question, who am I, right? And I've also authored some book chapters in neurology. So I've been in association with neuroscience, yoga, and neurotechnology for quite some time. And my journey has been majorly driven by pursuit of truth. Me wanting to study science, say psychology, say neuroscience and neurotech, has been trying to understand human mind and human behavior. And the simple reason of why I need to understand it is if I had that information, I'd be able to enhance or augment myself to live a life full of bliss, and also help others to live a life full of bliss. So that's number one. And I'm interested in two aspects. One is the scientific and technological part, which, as Sri mentioned in the morning, which has some physical, mental, and cognitive aspect of it. But there is another part, which is the spiritual and non-physical part, which I'm not sure how I can understand it. I'll be able to realize it, but I will not be focusing on that aspect more in my talk. Okay. I would like to comment, in order to understand yoga as such, I'd like to define it in 4 phases of understanding. The first phase is intuition-based yoga. So if you look at the image on the left, it's more about the 8 limbs of yoga talked in Patanjali's Yoga Sutra, which also, there was a talk in the morning which gave a glimpse of it, right? And the image on the right is my definition of trying to perceive what is yoga. And I'm not sure if I can realize what is actual yoga, but my definition that I used to say to my friends and colleagues is that, say if you see in the image of the right, there are numerous millions of cells in the human body, right? So cells cannot function without, say, me being conscious, or I cannot function without cells really lively. So what if a single cell in a human body asks the question, who am I, right? I'd like to leave you there and come back at the end of the session what I've been trying to say. So intuition-based yogic practices has been practiced, say, by spiritual gurus or masters who really understood certain ways in which the physical, mental, and cognitive and the spiritual aspects of well-being can be improved, right? And that the people who have been following and trying to practice this was minimal at the start. When we look at Yoga 2.0, this is where the scale comes in. And I'd like to call it evidence-based yogic practices. And we have reputed and esteemed scientists here who have been researching on evidences for yogic practices. And the book that I'm showing here was released somewhere around 1880s or 1850s, I guess. It was written by C.N. Paul, which talks about some evidences of yogic practitioners and how it's improving their physiology, right? But when it comes to evidence-based, the advantage is that we can get a lot of scale in today's world when we talk about science, when we talk about data-driven evidences on how people are improving. That would attract definitely a lot of people in this generation, even the upcoming generations. But what are the current gaps, right? At the start, when it's intuitive, you have a guru and you have all these aspects covered. But in scale, the problem is it's very subjective, right? As I mentioned, if I go and talk to a bunch of 50 people and ask them to define yoga, it just gets fragmented when I'm trying to define yoga. And when I go and ask somebody, do you practice yoga? And they say, yes, I do, I meditate, right? But if you see them, they'd be angry most of the times. So where is meditation, where is yoga, and where is this anger coming from? Do we really understand it, right? So that's exactly the problem with scale. And the second thing is evidence. As scientists were talking in the morning, Dr. Manjunath specifically, it's really hard to get longitudinal data of how yoga or the yogic practices, I would say, really help you in enhancing your physical or mental or cognitive well-being, right? That's one of the current gaps. And that's where I see Yoga 3.0 coming in, right? Yoga 3.0, I'd like to define it as a precision-based yoga, which I'm taking some analogies from the healthcare system. But what this is about is decentralizing this information from a scientific institute or from a research institute to an individual sitting here. Say, assume I give you a device which basically measures metrics with respect to mental or cognitive state. And you can follow any practices, you can see real time what is happening in your body. And that's where decentralization comes in. That's where science comes out of laboratory to each and everyone's hands. And we have seen analogies with respect to smartwatch. We have seen analogies with respect to smart rings. And it's not going to take so much time for the same to happen with yogic practices. And there has been a lot of capital flowing in the US and Europe to do the same, which many of us are not aware of it, but they're building technologies to measure it and show real-time things. And this, I'd say, Yoga 3.0. And there's going to be Yoga 4.0 in near future. And I would like to call them personal digital companions, or in other term, if I have to be very, very technical, artificial yogic intelligence. What does that really mean, right? Say, not many of us have access or time to spend years and years with a guru to try to understand and get trained on all these aspects, right? That could happen if we live in a utopian society where from when we are born, all our job is to seek the higher truth. And the whole society is being incentivized for seeking the higher truth. And we don't have a normal education system, and we don't have any other things. And we get paid money if we're able to get to the next level in spiritual stages. If we live in that kind of a society, the way we would think and the way we would move would be completely different. But fortunately or unfortunately, we don't live in that kind of a society, and all we have is time. And with a limited amount of time, we are also actually thinking about progressing in the yogic way, right? And that's when I see the growth of Yoga 4.0, just personal digital companions. An AI system which is going to really understand your body well, which is going to really understand what works for you and what doesn't work for you. And it's going to help you get better physically, mentally, and cognitively. And also pushes you to form habits with these practices, and it's going to be the best companion you can ever have in the path of yoga, apart from being a close associate with a guru. I mean, nothing can replace it, but this is going to be just an extension where the guru can take care of the spiritual part, but these things can take care of your physical, mental, and cognitive part, right? So again, taking an analogy, a coach in an Indian cricket team doesn't have to worry about whether the person is fit, whether the person has basics taken care. He just focuses on the high level part, right? And that's what I think these kind of technologies are going to bring in this society. Right. Okay, now the third part of my discussion is about Neurostellar. What Neurostellar is trying to achieve, and why am I here talking about Neurostellar? So Neurostellar wants to build technologies and wanted to stay in the space of Yoga 3.0 and Yoga 4.0, which is basically taking the scientific evidences that's available out there and trying to build technologies for people like you and me, which can adopt these scientific principles and help us improve in these paths, right? So that's an overall thing. But where are we right now and where do we need to go is something that we have to really think about. Okay. What Neurostellar is trying to do is basically work on building one of the world's most advanced mental or cognitive training platform. And the platform has 4 major components, right? One is when the platform basically interacts with an individual. The platform tries to understand the individual's needs what is the person's need, whether it's the person is highly stressed or the person wants to improve on specific cognitive aspects. This is the first step. And second thing is we try to build tools that can measure these metrics, right? Starting from aspects of your mental or cognitive state, which I'm telling it very on a broad scale, but I'll get into details in the further slides. And is it possible to measure metrics which is going to affect these? So what is affecting my mood? Do you know, if I call a random person on the stage and can you name any 10 factors in your lifestyle that's affecting your mood? The question is we might need to think. But all that I'm saying, looking forward is a space where it's been outsourced to a technology, right? The technology or is basically taking care of it and giving you insights, right? And the third part is the actual training part. Okay, measuring is more towards self-awareness, but what do you do after it? It's where comes the training part. And we, as a start of the platform, is working on biofeedback protocols, which are aimed to regulate your brain activity, heart rate, and breathing rate, right? And the fourth part is again awareness. So once you train, are you having changes real time? So that's going to be the fourth part. And this cycle continues in order to improve these metrics. But the question is, what does Orbit really do, right? Orbit is a platform which has a hardware, which is a smart wearable headband that can measure your EEG, that can measure your heart rate, that can measure your respiratory rate, but not inside a lab, but you can use it like a smartwatch. As Pushkar said, wearable EEGs are coming into play, but we want to build a module which can acquire these multiple physiological signals real time. And this basically measures your frontal brain activity in the frontal lobe, and also, as I mentioned, other metrics, right? So what's the science that we're using? The thing that we're trying to do is getting your lab instrument into a very portable, user-friendly instrument, right? As I mentioned, EEG and heart rate variability and breathing rate, these are the metrics that we use, and try to understand an individual state of calm. So we have something called as the calm index, which basically you can track it over a point of time on how calm you are throughout the day, something like that, and what are the triggers which is affecting. If you give the inputs to the system would basically generate a report on how calm you were during daily, weekly, or monthly, and what were the triggers that's affecting you, right? And the second thing is the training part, which I mentioned, which is to majorly work on improving your calm score, and that happens only when you improve physiological parameters as such. And that's basically the start of the platform, but we have a lot of things to work on in order to improve the accuracy and effectiveness of the platform. And what are the three pillars of Neurostellar's product, which is called the Orbit? We are hyper-focused on personalization, which is not everything works for everyone. So we wanted it to be highly personalized and highly quantified, because data is the key right now, and the data has to come to each and every individual. And the third part, which is going to attract, as someone mentioned, the next generation, is gamification. Right? The yogic journey is not about solving stress or solving cancer. Right? If you really live a yogic life, you're not going to get any of these in the first hand. So we wanted to gamify in such a way that it becomes a journey and not just addressing a short-term issue. That's what we intend to do by building these technologies and trying to change user behavior. Okay. The question is, the next is Yoga 4.0, which eventually either Neurostellar or any other company out there is going to come in and building these digital companions and AI. So if you see the evolution of AI, and the AI understands you really well. I mean, for people who say, who are against AI as such, I'd like to say if the data is really secure, AI is going to be a great companion. It's just an extension of a computer. If I ask people who are totally against AI, the question is, are you using mobile phones or a computer, right? If you're not using it, you can comment against AI, but eventually it depends on how an individual uses it, and definitely how the regulatory bodies frame policies to make sure your data is secure and private. Okay, how Orbit is being used right now. So as I mentioned, we have been building it for around 2.5 years. And we have been conducting validation studies on hardware, and I haven't included so much scientific and technical details because a lot of people are further going to talk about science, a lot of science here. But it's being used. Right now we have an upcoming project with the Indian Defense. We have been working with elite athletes, Olympians. We've also been working with executives and CXOs. We've been working with wellness enthusiasts like you and me who are looking to improve these wellness, but more in a quantified and scientific and data-driven way. And we're already getting traction from a lot of spaces. All that we need to do is to create a very strong presence in terms of accuracy and scientific credibility, and then also scale it further as we go forward. Right. Okay, coming to the future of Neurostellar, right? As I mentioned, it's one of the most, we are aspired to build one of the most advanced mental or cognitive training platform, right? By leveraging, and the reason why I'm here is we are going to do that by leveraging yogic techniques. And we all, even though we don't have, might have or might not have enough evidences, we all know that yoga has a huge role to play in the next generation or in today's world as such. Why? I believe yoga can solve climate change. Yoga can solve some of the most troublesome problems that humans are facing right now. And the reason is, if you start living the life in a yogic way, humanity won't create such problems itself. Your decisions would be with higher consciousness, right? Your decisions would be highly productive. You'd be a much more calm state and make better decisions. And think of the leaders if they do it in the same way. And that's where I believe yoga is necessary for upcoming generations. It's our job to join hands to take it further as well. Yes. And when it comes to the feedback of what Neurostellar devices got, right from people in renowned stakeholders in the sports industry, renowned stakeholders in, say, top-level executives, have really felt the need for such a device and technologies. And not just them, if you see in the morning talk, many of them have spoken a gist of what has to be done. And all that we are trying to do is taking that and making it happen. And we are in the starting stage, right? Okay, and what are the challenges right now for Neurostellar as such as a company, right? We need a lot of support on all different areas. Support in the sense collaboration with scientific institutes, collaboration with researchers. We need to build, first of all, we need to have a deeper understanding of how this can change each and every individual. We need to build technologies with high technical accuracy. We need to build technologies with a strong backing of science. And we need to, not just this can be good on a laboratory scale, but we have to get to consumers like you and me. We need to build technologies that you love using it. We need to build technologies that is super user-friendly, has a good user experience. We need to build technologies that can be distributed not just in Kerala, not just in Tamil Nadu, but all over the world, right? So a lot of different aspects that we have to cover while growing the company forward, but we think the attraction and the support that we've got till now has been immense. And we believe we are going to move forward with all your support, and we are always open to collaborations, right? I've come to the last part of things. I'm not sure if I've taken so much time. The last part of thing is talking about why now, right? And this is a deeper question to ask ourselves, all of you. If you look at the way yogic practices evolved, you know that India has been a hub for ancient yogic practices, and we know we are a motherland of a lot of yogis who have lived here. But if you really look at who is scaling these yogic practices, right, you see a lot of companies in the US and Europe who are doing it. So this is something that has been happening in different fields as such, and I believe that can be changed. If we really use all the evidences, if you leverage all the information that we've got as a country and try to build technologies and scale it ourselves, then I believe we'd be able to scale it much more effectively because we understand the essence of it rather than using yoga for stress reduction, rather than using yoga for different things. We understand the essence of it. And that would inspire, as he mentioned, a lot of younger generations to move ahead with yogic practices as a journey, right? He mentioned one interesting point, which is a link between outer space and inner space. If you really want to get inner, it has to be a journey. If you really want it to be a journey, you need to know what that journey has. What are the levels in that journey? If you look at life, you have different stages of life, and you have a lot of people who have gone through it, and you know what is it, which makes it also exciting, right? So if it's a journey of the inner world, you need to really understand what's there, the beauty of biology, and what happens if we change it. And if you have all this information, then it would become a journey for the younger generation. And eventually, like how they compete for external things, they'd be competing for improvement. They'd be competing for spiritual progress and mental progress. And that's where I see the next generation, and that would definitely happen in this century. And why now? Why Neurostellar? if you look at the aspects of health and well-being, there are some billion-dollar companies in the making. You have Apple for health, you have Aura, which is trying to build wearables for sleep measurement, there are companies for nutrition, there are companies for fitness, and these are not Indian companies, these are foreign companies. But there is another nascent space which talks about mind and cognition. And one advantage as well as disadvantage is the field is still nascent. And that's where I believe the position of companies like Neuroscientist are. And that's where we need to capture it at a very, very nascent stage and try to grow it so that we have a space in the global market as well. I'd like to conclude the talk with a thing, by repeating a thing again. So India is a country where we have been practicing this for a lot of time. And we need to join hands with industries as well, and not just scientific institutes and yogic foundations, industries and technology builders as well, to really scale this to lots of people so that the next generation would not be committing suicide before the age of 15. The next generation would not be feeling lonely at the age of 12. These are some things that you haven't heard of, right? And if we really want to stop it, if we care about the next generation, I think we all have to get together. And as in yogic system it says, if I say me, it's also all of you, right? And if all of us are really one, then all of us need to really realize and get this forward. Thank you, and Jai Hind.
The floor is open for a quick Q&A. We can actually first take questions towards Karthik, first 5 minutes, then followed by we will take questions for Pushkar. You have a mic.
Hi, my name is Lakshmi Menon.
Yeah.
I am a practicing psychologist and therapist.
Yeah.
Okay, I am particularly focused on trauma therapy.
Mm-hmm.
And what I have seen, particularly post the pandemic, the level of mental stress and illness and depressive, bipolar, it's all shot through the roof. A large reason in my own sort of experience of this, a large reason for this is what Ganesh said before, which is this deep sense of isolation, which got further expanded because of the lockdown and this whole thing about social isolation. I won't get into the science of what that does to your gut bacteria and how that impacts. My question is, what you're planning here is really good. Just two things. One is that, those of us who are in this science of yoga, we are constantly told that the focus has to shift from the external to the internal. So if we have yet another gadget which is going to constantly pull our attention all the time to see, are we in a theta wave, are we this, is our BP okay, how is that going to facilitate our inner journey? One. Secondly, what will Orbit do to heighten the sense of community, because it is the loss and lack of connect and community which is at the root of all mental health illnesses currently that the world is facing.
True.
These are my questions. Thank you.
Great. Okay. Trying to answer your first question, which is about the ethics or so of the technology on whether it's going to pull back. And this is the first immediate response when we actually think about technology. And it's a very valid question, because one or the other way, most of us are victims of it. And it's not so much more in our control in using when to use it and what to use it. So to answer that question, if you're assuming to build a companion, a technological companion, we have to be very conscious in the way it's going to show you data. So number one is, when is it going to show you the data? And how is it going to show you? So I can take an analogy of a friend or a physician, right? It's not going to pamper you with data every 15 or 30 minutes. It's going to take a while to really show you whether you're improved or not. And the frequency of communication, as well as the way it communicates, has to be mimicked like how a human does. So I would call it more building technology very consciously and having a humane aspect of it while building the technology. For example, if you see in Orbit, right? So we're building a personal dashboard where an individual is not pressed or nudged every 30-40 minutes to look at the mobile phone or the app. If he or she looks at it, it does not so much information. But we have a monthly report which basically you can view and trying to understand, say bi-weekly or monthly, what are your triggers, how is it being affected, and how can you improve? And that's my answer I guess it partly answered your question, but it all depends on how we build the technology. We have to build it very ethically. And to the second question, it's a great question again, and as a psychologist, I totally understand your question from that end. Because if you really want to improve a person's mental well-being, so it has to start from an individual, but it also has a psychological layer to it and a social layer to it. If you just put this device into someone, it's not going to really impact a lot because there are other factors, right? So as the platform progresses, we also will be including all the other aspects of it, right? So to nudge a person to spend time, right? That's why I call it like a really good friend. A friend observes you and helps you take the interventions and pushes you to take the interventions and also nudges you to spend time with other friends at the right time, right? So I think it has to act like that rather than just giving data. And the reason why other companies are also not doing it, I think the whole industry is at a nascent stage, and we just need to wait some time for other companies to also consider these aspects and serve humanity. Yeah, thanks.
Karthik, Dr. Venkatramanna.
Yeah.
Very enterprising talk. Couple of questions. So, life is a journey. We have a lot of ups and downs. It's not very equal.
True.
Equanimity is different. That's what we are aiming for. But there are lots of ups and downs that are also associated with variation in the standards.
Yeah.
So, first of all, what we need to do is a validation and the standardization.
Yeah.
How are we going to achieve that with this? Then only the question of scalability can come up.
Got it.
So the second question is that you also talked about awareness. Okay, awareness is purely biological, right? And you have the other side, which are the gadgets, which are going to be physical or mechanical. You need a proper interface which deals with these two appropriately, timely, and in a particular manner in all the situations.
Got it.
So then only I think we will be able to come in with a standardized answer.
Got it.
So we have two dichotomies here. One side we have the masters, we have Saturns visualize the whole thing, and we have other side we are trying to gain the experience and then bring it back to the real life. So can you answer this?
Yeah, great two questions. Yeah. So if you look at the standards of wearable devices right now, and specifically wearable devices that you and I are using it, the consumer devices, what's the ultimate goal of it at this point of time? If you look at it, that's more to form habits with healthy practices, right? And that would be the starting stage for our device as well. It's not going to intervene so much in trying to say that we have unlocked a completely new biomarker which can define all aspects of your cognitive state or mental state. No, we are not going to do that. We're starting very, very small. We're trying to understand a person's state of calm, which has already been done in research, and we're doing with these biomarkers, these physiological signals which I mentioned, which have been already done in research. All that we need to do is build a credible device which can acquire these signals and build a credible algorithm which can serve this purpose. And the objective is to make you aware and form habits with meditation or biofeedback and these practices. And how do we standardize it? We have been working with institutes, as I mentioned, to come up with white papers, right? So we have done some internal initial studies with NIT Rourkela and Anna University, and we're about to plan a study with NIMHANS. So white papers will soon be coming on standardizing on the technical and scientific standpoint, right? That's number one, the answer to your question number one. And question number two is again a question which can create a dilemma, which is the awareness can be biological and mechanical, right? The simple way to get self-aware is throw away all these devices and try to spend time with your thoughts, and you can achieve that. That's the question, right? And if that would be an ideal society, then I would shut down the company the next minute and join the group. But unfortunately, that's not the ideal society, right? You have been distracted by technology and social media so much that the only way to revert back is through technology till a certain point of time. A person needs technology till a certain point of time, and once he's self-aware, you can just throw away our product and continue your journey. That's the whole goal. It's not me. If we make you addicted to our product, the whole goal goes away, right? So we are not going to do that, and that's the reason why specifically I can understand. If I talk to people at my age, I can assure these kind of devices would help them. And not just them, people in 30s and 40s are using smart devices, and the data is just to push them to think about that. if you're thinking about your mind or your body for 30 minutes or even 5 minutes in a day, it's going to push you to think for 45 minutes or an hour. And that's more than enough to get self-awareness. And these devices are just assistants. And finally, it's in the hands of the individual to do that.
Thank you. Actually, Karthik, we have hardly 2-3 minutes left for the Q&A. If anybody has any question to Mr. Pushkar, I mean specifically, then you can ask him and to Mr. Pushkar or him.
I have a question for both of them, but I'll ask whoever you want. So since you said, Mr. Pushkar, I can ask you. So you talked about theta waves. So I was just wondering whether, I'm here in the front row. So I was just wondering whether these theta waves that you've measured, I mean, these are just yes or no? Are they present, are they not? Or is it also quantitative, how deep they are, how long they are, how quickly they appear, and what kind of retention they have? Because all of these parameters are really important in remaining in a state. So for a lot of people who practice, I guess the key question is, a lot of people get a taste of that sweet spot, but it doesn't last. You know, and then in all of these devices, and I think that's the common thread for the two talks that we've had in this session, is that once, how do we interpret these data? I mean, do we just look at it very superficially, say how much of the activity are we having, or you know, do we go deeper into the quality of it? Now we're very advanced. You know, I will go to Karthik here. Fascinating, Karthik. What your thoughts are absolutely. I think in this generation, you know, I think we're all geeks for technology. So if you give us a smartwatch for yogic capacity, I think a lot of people will take it. But I think the question really is, where is, you know, where are we in terms of using this data, understanding this data, and building that maturity, or even, like he said, standards. You know, what are the standards for from a yogic standpoint? You know, what is this point where we make this turn that we're not going to get aggravated? I don't need my smartwatch to tell me I'm getting angry all the time. It's an experiential truth.
True.
Isn't it? Yeah. So I have a whole bunch of other questions for him, but if you let me, I'll come back.
You can. Okay. So when it comes to standardization of the markers of mental or cognitive state, I think the standardization has to be made. So we are in that stage, that kind of an early stage where we need to build the device, we need to build the standards, and we need to work on developing new biomarkers as such. So that we are in an early stage, but we have just taken a very first baby step towards it. And when it comes, a follow-up question that you said, which is about the usage, how are people using it, right? So when you look at the strategy that we are taking and the early adopters that we are working with people who are already looking at any sort of technology that can give them an upper edge, right? So say elite athletes, say executives, right? So for them, a productivity loss of 15 minutes can cost millions of dollars, right? So they are looking at any sort of solutions or which can help them improve. So we are looking at them as well. Along with, we are working with people who are interested in wellness because they're interested in a product, right? So I think the early adoption is going to be challenging for companies like us, but all that we need to look at is we need to go look at the consumer behavior and keep iterating and not being very, very static on a technology or the form factor or the science that you're doing on. So we need to be very agile, and that's what we're looking at right now. And that'll be evolution of our products. Headband can be evolved into something else, and the technology can be evolved into something else. But the answer is I don't know right now, but we have to wait and watch. Yeah.
If you want to add up something.
Well, just to add to it, I think as Sir Shriyam said, I think what we are having an issue is that if we want to, let's say if you're having an EEG on your head, like either Neofun is one of the companies, you know, who are just giving it around. When you're angry, yes, it will show up certain views. And one of the things we have noticed with people who have been meditating, some of the EEGs which we did, you know, they have been there for 20 years, some in 10 years, 5 years. What we realized that everybody wanted exactly what you are even, you know, pointing out. They want to be established in it, but they're not able to. But the fact is they're able to reach it, and during that time, something changes. And that's why we need to go to the next stage of this research where we have fMRIs and PET scans, because we know that the brain physically, you know, it changes. So once that changes, these sort of things will, by itself take care of. But the point was that there are two aspects to it which we are sort of missing. One is, basically what Sir said, that there's a heart aspect to it, because the anger will give you have a EEG pattern. In fact, a lot of control groups data is available, but where did the source of that anger come from? Doesn't seem to be coming necessarily from the brain. It is entirely somewhere else. And when we say a new world order, once again, and the bhavs and the EEGs cannot be separated. So it will be very interesting to see, how it sort of pans out.
Yeah, one question.
Maybe that may be the last question, please.
Yeah,
Very short of time.
very enticing talk. You talked about importance of yoga in becoming an astronaut, right? So my question is the other way. It can encourage a lot of youth to practice yoga, to experiencing space is a phenomenal experience. I agree with that. Now, when you can silence the mind completely, you lose the time as well as the space in relationship cognitively, right? So now we call it as in neuroscience as a metacognition, right? Will that help? Suppose one space travel will make a yogi.
Oh, sorry. One space travel will make a
Can help in becoming a yogi. Now we have to spend janmas, according to the description.
Okay.
You have to keep doing sadhanas for janmas to reach that level. So if you can silence the mind and creating a deformity in the mind by going to the space where your mind is silenced completely.
Right.
So you are totally out of space-time relationship, right?
Okay.
So will that come back as a yogi is my question. If that is so, it will be much more interesting.
Yeah, so I would, in this particular case, I do tend to take the scriptures, some of, let's say, the Patanjali Yoga Sutras, I take them as statements of truth. Because I don't know how many in this audience would, let's say if I'm talking about relativity, if I'm talking about Newtonian physics, and I sit here and say bad things about it, I don't think too many of you are going to be worked up about it. It's all right. If I say here that, maybe Patanjali is wrong.
Hello.
We need to rewrite the Yoga Sutras, it was 5,000 years old. I don't even use a science book which was 50 years old. So, I don't think anybody here is ready to agree that Patanjali is wrong. That can only mean if Patanjali is right. And if Patanjali is right, then that becomes the basis of my, the work which we want to do, I think, believe through the IYRF, because eventually what is the whole modern physics is based on axiom, postulates and assumptions. The whole thing is an assumption. The laws of science are the same in the entire universe. When you can't even see more than, the observable universe is just about 13 point and the real universe is 19.6 odd billion years far. How do you know the laws are same? So that basis. So what is happening is that when we are taking this thing ahead, partly what's happening is that we are not sticking to the fundamentals. When we lose the fundamental, we are lost. My base is my Patanjali. Yours is modern science, is the same thing. Now once I go with that, some of these yogis, even for that matter, Wim Hof or certain people who do seem to be, able to, let's say, live in ways which are very different than what a normal human being might be. So I believe another way of looking at it might be that maybe some, yogis became astronaut, they ended up here, and they couldn't exactly go back.
One last question, please.
Hello.
Last question, please. Last question. Yeah.
Patanjali Yoga Sutra says you have to follow yama, niyama and all those stuff. Now, is there any instrument which can measure my emotions when I go through all this? Or if it is true, if I can get a smartwatch, whenever I get angry, it comes an alarm bell or something.
Yeah, in fact, to be very honest with you, if we just take a poll here, let's say the smartwatch is at least, more than a decade old now, in an affordable range. How many of us are here wearing a smartwatch here, which we are using to measure heartbeats? Can we have a hands? And this is the exact issue. That not maybe too good for you. So what I'm trying to say is that technology and adaptation of technology is an entirely different thing. And as you mentioned, sir, so the thing is that what Sir Shri mentioned, I believe there are two aspects. We are just looking at a very sort of claiming the ground which we have lost to, a certain way of thinking. But those things, I think, and only a guru can, look at it. But I will add something to that. There's this belief that there is one guru, and you need to be next to him, and nowadays, it's like a bit of a problem. I mean, we know it firsthand, we want to get close to sir. But that is to say, let's put it this way, don't you and I understand that? Like, if I have to deal with 100 people, it's not possible. Would I say Sri Guru Babaji have not figured this out? Of course he has. So I believe this assumption, that we are carrying, that, it has to be close to the Guru only, and then it will work. If you and I can see that, I'm sure Babaji can see that as well. And that reality has to be as, that's the whole idea. So, all right.
Last question, please.
Hi, I'm Ramya. My question to you is, My question to you is more with regards to understanding the power of mental energy. So, in both your areas, you think it could be something that we could tangibly get data from and use in space exploration or building technology or gadgets for that regard? Understanding the role of mental energy and taking tangible outputs of it in each of your areas.
Mental energy?
Yeah. The power of the mind.
Yeah, okay. So
You can give a very quick answer. We have already ran out of time.
Okay, fine. So we can definitely touch the physical aspects, which is brain and working on the brain. And when it comes to the mind again, so we don't know what's the ultimate power of the mind. If there is a definition which can say that, I'm not sure. So the thing is, there is obviously a lot of aspects which we can train, and definitely through technology we can train. And so yeah, that would be my short answer.
Relative, so we have to move for the next session. The final last question. Please take the mic back.
I want to quickly respond to the question that came from sir, which is how do you differentiate from Neuralink? That was the question, right? So Neuralink focuses on intracortical chips. You need to do a surgery, a very quick surgery to place the chips. The advantage is it has high bandwidth, and it's mostly used for treating neurological disorders at this point of time. But we are going through a non-invasive approach and trying to capture signals through wearables. So that would be, technologically, that would be the difference in terms of our approach, right? So that's a quick answer to you.
Thank you so much, Karthik, Raghavendran, and Pushkar, Ganesh, Vaidya for the wonderful talks.
So we had a very wonderful sessions. Thank you, Pushkar, Ganesh, Vaidya, and Karthik, Raghavendra, for the beautiful insight you have just rendered on us. So our next session, it is session number 3. It will be chaired by Dr. Jyotindra Kumar.
Shri Gurubhyo Namah. Thank you, Brenda, for that introduction. Friends, we are slightly delayed, so without much ado, I'll get straight to session number 3. This session is on biomolecules. I know this is a mixed audience. There are scientists who readily understand what this session is all about, and also people from the lay public who are practitioners of yoga. We all know, we would speak about the microcosm, which is the human body, and the macrocosm, which is the whole world, and how these two interact. Well, this is a signaling system that exists, and this signaling system is supposed to be enhanced by yoga. And there is a mechanism that exists in the human body, how we communicate with the external world, and primarily it is through the breath. And in yoga, they talk about soham, the intake, the ingress, and the outflow of air from the human body. And this in turn brings about a cascade of biochemical reactions which communicate, which is called the first cellular mechanism, messenger mechanism, the second cellular messenger mechanism, and at the cellular level, what are the changes that are produced. Now, this is an area which we are on much firmer ground compared to the space travel and stuff like that, because these are all measurable entities and lot of work has gone into it. Today's speaker, the first speaker, is Dr. Srinivas Gopala. May I ask you to please come on stage?
I'm here.
Oh, Dr. Srinivas. Yeah, that's wonderful. Yeah, let me formally introduce Dr. Srinivas. He is the head of biochemistry, the most appropriate person to tell us how these biomolecules are produced, how they talk with each other, and what the effect they have on human metabolism. Dr.
Srinivas.
Yeah, Dr. Srinivas Gopala did his MSc from JIPMA Pondicherry and followed it up with a PhD in biochemistry from the Regional Cancer Center, Trivandrum. His biodata is pretty extensive, and for lack of time, you will permit me to skip it for the time being and come straight to the subject, which is yoga and biomolecules. Over to you, Dr. Hari.
Thank you, sir. I think I will not go as much as details what sir has already mentioned. He has given you almost what I am going to speak. Well, so I'll have to speak less now. So I thank the organizers for the opportunity for giving these talks, and this like a perspective. First of all, I have to say that I do not have any first-hand data. So whatever I have been, I'll have included in it is based on somebody else's work. So, but I just present to you to prove certain things which already has been talked by many. So, yes, this is a very profound question which has baffled minds, but not me, because with respect to who I am, unlike Ramana Maharshi's question, this is, as a scientist, I believe that who am I is better answered by my students, just like a guru by his disciples. So these are the number of PhD students who have worked with me. I'm a trained cancer biologist. So you can see that the number of PhD students who has done PhD in me in oncology is the highest. And then part of me had transformed into a scientist working in diabetes and cardiovascular sciences, which has led to the following PhD students. And I currently have 6 PhD students in different areas. So rather than being a core practitioner of one area, you can see that I am more like a butterfly sitting on areas which interest me, from oncology to diabetes to dementias and cardiovascular changes in diabetes. So in nutshell, I should introduce myself, what we do in lab. If yoga, if you call that means yoga and meditation, basically works through the control of respiration and the gaseous exchange, probably meditation to a greater extent. What I do in my lab is to assess this respiration at the organellar level. In another way, like we know that the oxygen we breathe has to be used by our body, and that is primarily done by the mitochondria, which is otherwise called as the powerhouse of cell, which utilizes this. So in my lab, we kind of assess how the mitochondria at different disease states behave, how do they breathe, how do they respire, if you can call as a molecular respiration. So this is the closest I am coming with yoga and meditation. So the organelle which I study uses up oxygen and throws out carbon dioxide, as we all do as a human being or as living organisms. So this is just an example how we studied the effects of chloroquine, a molecule which was very much talked about during the COVID pandemic, and the hydroxychloroquine per se, how it can be prophylactically used for COVID treatment. So what we found out by a simple experiment, that it can actually create mitochondrial dysfunction in the cell culture and the animal model which we have. So the constant or prolonged use of this, though probably is sometimes recommended, it is recommended in malaria, but one has to know about the consequences of that when you use it for a long time and with a higher concentration. So we study those kind of things, what are the changes happens inside the cell when we use this. So a little bit of about mitochondria, because this is the single organelle which is responsible for why we are alive and why we respire. And if this mitochondria was not there, probably we would not have evolved as much as we think as we are. And this single simple organelle determines the life and death as well as the balance of it. So it has several components. It produces energy. It can also be a signal for cellular destruction. It controls the what you call as the metabolic rates in the cell, as well as it is also giving a lot of components of biosynthetic pathways which can synthesize parts of cells which when they want to divide, etc. I've used the term transducers because transducers are nothing but these are called mechanisms that convert a type of energy to another form. Like today morning also there was what is that called, a talk regarding how do we study this, how do we study two different streams of this yoga and science, how do we link, how do we. I think I come from an institution which did this kind of an amalgamation. 40 years back, our founder director, Professor M.S. Vaidya, did an experiment in creating an institution with amalgamating clinicians, scientists and engineers, which was then thought by many will be a failure. But after 40 years, now most of the IITs, the Institute of Sciences are all going to make their own medical institutions, understanding the importance of such coming together of medical clinicians, engineers and scientists. But it took 40 years for people to understand. So sometimes some things takes time, because people working in the institution knew about it, but others to know about, and acknowledge, it almost took 45 years to make other institutions, and there are not single institution which has come out in full swing. It has just been thought about even now. Yet another example I would quote is Professor Vaidya, what he himself did is when he took up Ayurveda research after he retired, and what he did was how to study Ayurveda by modern science. Yet again, he has shown that how to use, because that was a concern, how do we study yoga and science? I mean, can the modern science be used for measuring yoga and other relative? I mean, unfortunately, that's the only way for us. Modern science is truth, like we cannot escape it. So that's the only way we can. So Professor Vaidya actually did this Ayurvedic research. He has made certain homework regarding how to normalize the categorization of patients through Ayurveda classification and what to look in modern ways. And I'm sure that those are published papers. I'm sure that it will take another 20-25 years for people to evaluate. And so in science it takes time. That's what I wanted to say. But hopefully by this kind of exercises we may also bring in some things which can be used for harnessing the power of yoga. But before that we need to understand it, and probably that will be the only reason why we are meeting here. So whatever happens in our body through yoga or meditation, we have only one way. Whatever happens in the body can be recorded by modern medicines or modern techniques, diagnostic methods, and machines which can be used for for detecting signals. That is the only way forward. So how do you use it? It depends on the scientist, by knowing what are the yogic principles behind it. And the very fact was emphasized by many speakers, saying that the scientist should actually get to know what yogic science means, and that knowledge will help in designing more studies to get robust data. And this is not new. Like I think somebody else projected this, this book, which was published in 1882, N.C. Paul. He was basically interested in finding out what is the science behind this, and you can see that, you know, that in the marked area, the exhalation of carbonic acid from the lungs is materially diminished by the inaudible and the frequent repetition of certain words such as om and hum. So this was realized by people as early as in 1880s, and they were trying to find out what causes this. Why is chanting one syllable or one particular sound causes the changes in, you know, the carbon dioxide emission less or. So what we are doing is nothing new. This is 125 or maybe more than years. And you can see that of some Jal Vakil's very famous paper on Lancet, which my dear friend Manju referred to in today morning. I don't know by today's standard whether we'll be able to do this feat, because the one person was completely put in a concrete tank and sealed and kept it for 62 hours, and he came out alive, and his parameters and all were. And in fact, for the last 6 hours, if you read that 6 hours, he was put, water was poured into that tank, the water airtight, and for 6 hours he was basically in the water. I don't know whether current IEC would recommend or even approve such kind of studies, but it is 1950s, and it was done in the, if you read that, 10,000 people were watching this, and J.B.S. Haldane basically gave an explanation how he could survive by theoretically calculating it. So if you look at this part, the second one, experiments on Indian voluntary control of heart. So this is 1961, paper came in circulation. So when we talked about predatory journals and you know, publishing in, but if you look at these papers, Lancet and Circulation still are the number one in that field. So we have examples like this. We just need to do, you know, to do what has been shown earlier. You know, so the path is there. It's not that yoga cannot be published in great journals, but we have to follow certain norms, and then we can do this. So this is for the heart rate, voluntary stoppage of heart rate, heart as well as the pulse. So in fact, this paper very clearly suggests that, you know, heart rate was diminished, but it was not stopped, of course, but the pulse was stopped. So we're very clearly depicting what was done and what was not done, and what was claimed. So this is just to an overview. Most of the yoga and meditation is supposed to work through the neurohormonal regulation, inflammatory response by reducing inflammation and by maintaining a perfect redox state balances, and also through boosting our immune status. So these are the ones which are commonly studied, which I am not going to talk about. What I am going to slightly, one slide each, is talk about the lesser known aspects of it, called 4 or 5 components of it, how it affects autophagy, DNA repair, epigenetic regulation, gut microbiome, and nitric oxide signaling. I assure you I won't go deep into it, just give examples. Those of you not coming from the science background, autophagy is nothing but a housekeeping mechanism which our body does when you go on fasting. As yoga practitioners and interested people, you must be knowing about the importance of fasting, which has been, you know, told to us from time immemorial. But there was a time when people, you know, when you fast, you get health will increase. There were times when people ridiculed, how can you not eat and then get healthy? But now we know, after a lot of research, that 40% reduction of your calorie can increase your longevity by a good number of years. You know, so now we know because we have the data. Earlier we did not have the data. There was only, you know, a sermon or something which has been told, which we never believed. We went into a lot of excavations and scientific these things, and now we know calorie restriction. Now the question is, how do we use this knowledge? When autophagy as a biological mechanism even went on to get Nobel Prize, a Japanese, but how do we use this? I mean, fasting is very simple, but there's an 8-hour fasting, there's a 4-hour fasting, a 12-hour fasting, 16-hour fasting, 3-day fasting, and 21 days, whatever. But how do we, this is the challenge which we have. And each person has different threshold levels. Each organ in our body, you fast for 12 hours, your liver gets devoid of glycogen completely. The muscle takes a little more time. So what happens to different organs when you fast? That depends on the process of the housekeeping mechanisms called autophagy. So we need to know how this autophagy is present in each organs. Unless we know, we cannot target it. So this is simply we can do by taking your blood cells, you can stain, you can do that, the simplest one. But what about liver, what about brain? I do not have an answer. Effects of DNA repair, yes. By yoga and meditation, people have shown that the telomerase enzyme, the length has increased, which means that the cell senescence can be reduced by these methods. Of course, the question can come, if you have cancer, if you do yoga, what happens? Your cancer cells will survive more? I have no idea. These are questions which I pose to you all because I don't have an answer. Epigenetics is another mechanism by which these practices can silence some of your genes very easily and silence it or activate it. Examples like TNF alpha is an inflammatory gene. You can do some effects of yoga which can inhibit this gene by methylating, which means that you are immune to that TNF alpha induced inflammation. You are immune to that. How good is that? Very good. But who will get the benefit? Can anyone get it or can all get it? Again, there's no question, there's no answer. The next big thing is microbiome. I think I will not talk too much, but I'll go into one particular important aspects that a lot of work has come with microbiomes, diversity, how it is actually helpful in the body. With regard to exercise, I'm not talking about food or food supplements or anything. Just by controlling your exercise, the moderate exercise, the minimal exercise and the intense exercise, you can change the microbiome in the body. Means it's wonderful, to know. You don't have to do anything. You just have. So if exercise can do it, why can't yoga? Because there are different postures. Some postures are recommended for some. So are there any studies? Again, unfortunately, no. So there's a lot of scope for such studies to look at the microbiome differences that happens with different types of yoga and meditation. So ultimately, there is also a theory, you are what your microbiome want to be. If your microbiome is happy, you are good, healthy, you are healthy because they produce things, they produce metabolites which actually affects your brain. Now, we'll just go on fast. This is just to show in this JAMA, the statement, what they say is, there need to be controlled studies, there need to be good randomized controlled studies to look at the benefits of yoga. I just wanted to make sure that part. Now, there's one example. I'm not a person of follow this inner engineering program, but this paper came in 2021 in PNAS, a very high impact journal, where how they planned this study made the paper to be published in PNAS. I request, this is what the way forward to us. If you want to get, by looking at what Sri M has, he told to us only one thing: provide robust data, generate robust data. Do not settle for, low level things. Look for the truth. So once we target, once we plan the project, once we plan it, the planning is everything. If you plan a good study, you get good data. If you don't, you get some data which may not be useful at all. So this is one example I will show you. This is it's a simple example of looking at their immune regulations during treatment. They have taken samples from before the retreat and after the retreat, and 3 months after the retreat, and they have good robust data which makes the journal to believe that this is truth. This is just like kind of the only thing what I think we need to know is that yoga sciences need to be integrated with a lot of data science, because this will be, if you want to relate yoga, you need to know about taking data from different points. You need electrical signals, you need metabolic signals, you need proteome signals, you need epigenetics, you need genetic sequences. All this is required. So amalgamation of data sciences is absolutely essential if you want to do something useful in yoga research. This is another simple example by chanting. One group was chanting Om chanting, one was in Tirumala Pranayam, which I don't know what it is, and the right side, the attention control subjects were just reading books, which means that they were not doing chanting, they were not doing any, they were just focusing on a book reading. You can look at the differences in the the protein which has been in the left panel and the right panel. Just by chanting for 10 minutes, if you can, this is by salivary samples, if you can make this difference, can you imagine what, this is data what I am talking. This I will skip, and I will just talk about 10 years ago, there's a meeting held here on nitric oxide. So I met somebody, a speaker from Karolinska Institute, John Lundberg. He was talking about making a nitrite, oral nitrite, for making the mitochondria more robust. So we discussed many things, and then he found out, he was telling me how he found about how humming changes the nitric oxide levels in our nasal thing, and how it can be. So which led, that's the first time I got inspired to look into humming, and then I landed up into Brahmari Pranayama, and this is the Lundberg, and it was all serendipitous. He was not about to find this. It was a finding which he just was measuring nitric oxide on a person who had to cough because of some irritations, and that coughing leads to something called humming at the last. That sound. And with that, he found out that humming causes this. So when I interacted with him, I said, there is some Om chanting. He was not aware of it. So he said, what is it? I said, Om. He said, yes, that's exactly what it is. And finally, which led to me writing up a proposal and giving to Satyam. And unfortunately, I've been waiting since 2020. I've got the project sanctioned, but no money yet. So my enthusiasm to pursue yoga is currently diminishing day by day by the weight of almost over 4 years. So I'm hopeful that if any one of you have any influence or know-how, I would request that I'm very eager to take this, because it is inspired by science, not by anything else. So I would be very happy if I could present this data when we meet next time. So there's a book called by Paul Kalanithi. I don't know how many of you have read. Yeah, so one has to read it. So the title is When Breath Becomes Air. It's very touching. It's an autobiography. So, but I think yoga is when air becomes breath. I think we are talking about how the simple air which we don't see, which we, how it becomes breath. I think doing science, something related to this, I'm excited to do, I'm waiting for that. So hopefully I will be doing justice next time when I meet you. Thank you all.
Thank you, Dr. Srinivas. That was a fairly comprehensive view, but the science in itself is, far, far deeper than this. There's so much of research going on. If there are any questions from the audience, we'll take them now, because the next speaker is going to be on the visual platform. There is no physical speaker, so we'll take the questions for this session right away.
Yes.
Anybody, please? Yes, please. Sir, okay, please give him a mic.
Is a personal question. How much money you asked for under Satyam?
Oh yeah, that's they sanctioned around just 14 lakhs.
14 lakhs.
Okay, there was somebody wanting to ask a question. Madam, after that, ma'am.
Sure.
Yeah.
I was quite interested in the autophagy and how the evidence stacks up for fasting. And in your research, do you have any data to suggest? You did allude that there is no clear data, but can you indicate what kind of fastings what further research can be implemented, and whether you have any plans to investigate that further?
See, the major problem with autophagy induction, because the simplest way to increase your autophagy is fasting. But that is the most difficult to do. So now people are looking at, can we get molecules which when we take will mimic fasting? I mean, we are very, we want short, very fast results. It's just like exercise boosters. I don't want to do exercise, but I'll take one pill which will mimic my body that my body has exercised. It's a very ingenious way. But with respect to autophagy, the issue is just like what I said. The levels of autophagy, our cells, dependence on autophagy is diverse. So if you take an autophagic activator or an inhibitor, whatever, the kind of biological effects which will have it on brain and on heart, on gut, on kidney is completely different. So unlike, this is a phenomena. For example, neurons need autophagy, while gut probably is not affected by it. And heart, basically, again, all the postmitotic organs require autophagy. So it's kind of difficult to bring out molecules which can, but the safest way is calorie restriction, because you won't die by calorie restriction, because you will definitely go run and eat some food before you die. So, but it is more difficult. But a lot of studies are being done how to inhibit organ-wise autophagy. For example, if you can, activate the autophagy process in the adipocytes, which can remove all that fat deposits and metabolize it, then definitely it is beneficial. But we are not there yet. Yes.
Hello, sir. I'm Shreyas. I come from engineering background, so nothing related to the medicine field. But I have one question. Since you related to the sound of hum, this is all about yoga here. So I had a thought that now let's say we have singers and artists. Yeah. They also sing for a long time and they go into a meditative state or something. Yeah. I have not experienced something like this, but just about the literature, what it says. Is there also a research on this? How do you differentiate this? Maybe in a molecular way. I don't know all the terms, but I just had a thought on this.
Well, I think we, after a meeting with Lundberg, we had a meeting in Sri Chitra itself. So while we were discussing, I myself asked, one question: when do we hum? When you are in pain? Or in comfort? Yes. I mean, how many of you think that you hum because you are happy? How many of you think that when you are sad you hum? Few. So again, generally it is you feel happy, you hum, or the other way around, you hum and you become happy. because research have found out that humming alone increases your, because of gravity, there is a lesser air circulation in the respiratory. The humming increases that to 40%, and 40% in medical terms is very high, just by humming. There is no medicine, there is no expense of money here. It is just by doing it.
How long?
I mean, he was doing it for 5 minutes, but there are different. So the 5 minutes, what happens is the paranasal sinuses of this humming, due to humming, water, the nitric oxide is there, that is expelled, and which reaches the body by enteric circulation. And the effect is seen by 1.5 hours. Those are human studies which was done.
Dr.
But
Srinivas,
I was sad to know that, we know about the Om chanting, humming, the same principles. It is just the resonating of the, this area.
Dr. Srinivas, it is very well known that using Bija mantras, Bija mantra that are used have the same effect. In fact, there is one school which uses 432 frequency sound, and you get a deep feeling of calmness. So it is believed due to the biomolecules liberation. There are very speculations that there may be endorphins, and
these are all speculations. Even with regard to, after submitting this project, I saw a paper review. I could have written the review because, we formulated but somebody else have formulated a review and published it. I was looking for the data. There's no data yet. So I'm still good on my project. Nobody has done it. It is still, people are only talking, this can be the mechanism. Why can't we say this is the mechanism? And this study has been waiting.
Maybe the new center will be able to help you with that.
No, what I'm saying is we need to be a little more serious on this, because there are not many who, like what he said, not many who are interested in, if they are interested in science, they may not be interested in yoga. If they are interested in yoga, they may not even come near the science, because they don't want any evidence.
There is no immediate application besides the pursuit of knowledge. If there was some applicational usage, then there would have been entrepreneurs funding it. This is pure research. That is the problem. We all face it.
In fact, for that I have an answer. You just use this Brahmari Pranayama, like when schools, somebody was talking about, do it in schools. Without even spending a money, you can have all these issues solved. It's not going to be detrimental. It's all just 2 minutes humming per day. But unless we have data, we cannot proceed further. So I'm not complaining here, but I think this is a platform where I thought I will, share this, so that we can do it more seriously.
Dr. Srinivas, actually compared to the cellular signaling mechanism, it is supposed to have greater effect on the immuno response in the human body.
Yes.
Which is the more dominant one?
That
is it
has
on
been
the
well studied. Immune.
In fact, the next paper is on that, the effect on immunology of the human.
The PNIS paper I was talking about was fully on immune regulation by regulating the inflammatory mechanisms. It is not increasing the inflammatory mechanism, but activating immune response. The first paper. So I hope next speaker will.
Unfortunately, the next speaker is not there, but we have a paper as a recording, which is on the immunologic response to yogic activity.
Yeah.
All related, right? Mitochondria, immunology, everything is connected to each other, right?
Yes.
It's a powerhouse. So unless all are related to each other.
But can you throw some more light on this oxygenation? Because basically yoga controls your oxygenation rate. It is supposed to increase manyfold with yogic activity. And it has an inverse relation on blood pressure as well as on your heart rate. And many yogis have, as you said, you rightly pointed out, what could be, can you speculate on the mechanism by which this stage is attained?
In the paper in Lancet paper, when the yogi was taken outside, his respiration rate was 8 to 10 per minute. So it was pretty low when compared to what he normally.
How do you account for it?
That's what I think. Probably it is the practice. For example, his heart rate was 80, his pulse was 118/78, but his respiratory rate was 8 to 10, which is almost half of. One of the things could be that the, what is that called, the mitochondria utilizing the energy, oxygenation, that rate, probably if it can be diminished. Because there is a lot of difference between the rate of mitochondria using oxygen. So as far as control, I know that there are differences for Caucasians and Asian Indians, because Asian Indian mitochondria is much robust. It actually, fires out metabolizes all the things very fast than the Caucasian mitochondria. So maybe that's the only way.
Thank you, Dr. Devasena. Reminds me that we are running short of time, but it was a very absorbing subject. Thank you for a wonderful presentation.
Thank you, thank you.
There is one more presentation which is to follow, which is Yoga and Immunity. I'll introduce the speaker. Dr. Tanwi Trushna is presently working in the Department of Environmental Health and Epidemiology at ICMR Bhopal as a Scientist C. She completed her MBBS from Mahe, Manipal, and worked as a medical officer in urban and rural primary health centers before joining as Scientist B in 2019. She has had many projects, and this is the result of one of her studies.
I'm sorry to have missed a wonderful opportunity to mingle and learn from all the learned faculty and colleagues who have gathered in Trivandrum today. Nevertheless, I'm still excited to be sharing my limited knowledge on the interesting topic of immunomodulation, the role of yoga and mind-body interventions. Before discussing the myriad evidence profile of yoga and mind-body interventions in terms of their effects on the immune system, I would first like to give a brief introduction of what exactly is immunomodulation and why do we even need it. Immunomodulation has been defined in a multitude of ways, but in simple words, if I have to say what it is basically the functional modulation of the immune system, either to enhance a non-adequate immune response, which we can call as immunostimulation or immune activation, or it can be downscaling of an amplified immune response known as immunosuppression, and the target is to restore the homeostasis. As can be seen on the image in this slide, it can either work through the innate immune response and the adaptive immune response as well. And depending upon which cell types have been activated, the net consequent steps depend on that step. So why exactly do we need clinically immunomodulation? Well, immunosuppression has been useful in the treatment of a different variety of disease conditions. For example, there are around 80 to 100 autoimmune diseases, the common ones that we are familiar with being rheumatoid arthritis, lupus, Crohn's disease, type 1 diabetes mellitus, etc. And in many of these conditions, immunosuppression has often been used as a treatment modality. Same holds true for other conditions like organ transplantation, allergic and chronic inflammatory conditions. In contrast, immunostimulation has been useful in infectious disease prophylaxis as well as in cancer, trauma and burn cases. Particularly, the recent global COVID-19 pandemic has shown us that immunomodulation has a very significant role in conditions like such pandemics. Going on, even though we have discussed about clinical immunomodulation, it is not just clinical patients who actually need immunomodulation. I would rather say that our current lifestyle and environmental factors kind of mandate its requirement in almost all, even those who are healthy. I rather prefer the term apparently healthy because even though there are no clinical manifestations, most of us are exposed to everyday stressors, and these everyday stressors have been known to affect the immune system. For example, research over the past 3 to 4 decades has clearly established that even psychological stress can affect clinically relevant immune system outcomes, including inflammatory processes, wound healing, responses to infectious agents, and other immune challenges, including vaccination, autoimmunity, and cancer. Moreover, individuals vary in their ability to cope with stressful stimuli and in the differences in perception of stress and mood, and hence adverse life events can affect individuals in a different manner. Therefore, considering this correlation or this connection between stress and immune system malfunctioning, it is highly significant because in today's world we are surrounded by multiple stressors on a day-to-day basis. Hence, researchers are actively garnering evidence and reviewing it, as can be seen on this particular research article on screen, which shows that the impact of stressors on immune system is being actively researched. Let us also consider that we are living in an era of environmental pollution and climate change like we have never seen before. We are living in a world where annually 7 million premature deaths occur simply because of the exposure to the toxic pollutants that are present in the inside and outside of our houses in the ambient air. And many diseases ranging from stroke to heart disease to cancers have been attributed to these exposures. But these exposures do not occur in a similar manner around the globe. If you look at the global maps shown in this infographic by the WHO, it shows clearly that low and middle income countries like India are disproportionately affected by such situations. Hence, extensive research has also been done to look at the effect of such air pollutants on the human immune system. And it has been shown that inhaled particulate matter can accumulate in macrophages and in the lung-associated lymph nodes over years, which ultimately compromises the immune surveillance and the immune system functioning. Hence, it is very important that we also consider immunomodulation in this aspect. That is what I would consider immunomodulation for apparently healthy individuals. As I have already provided the rationale for why we need immunomodulation, not just for the diseased population, but also for potentially those apparently healthy individuals who are subclinically exposed to multitude of factors and hence have their immune system dysfunctioning without them having any manifestations, any clinical signs or symptoms. If in that situation, it is a given that immunomodulation, if we use it as a therapeutic option, should not add to the existing health issues and become a burden. Hence, researchers have already looked at the state-of-art evidence of what is happening in immunomodulation, and it has mostly been seen that the clinical immunomodulation strategies at present have a lot of drawbacks. Therefore, researchers are now moving forward to natural immunomodulators. Hence, it makes sense that yoga and mind-body interventions, which are a non-pharmaceutical, holistic and integrated approach, can be used as immunomodulators. Therefore, the research into immunomodulatory effects of these interventions is slowly increasing over the past few decades. And in my subsequent slides, I will be drawing upon the evidence published by these recent systematic reviews. Like, for example, I have shown the ones published by Yoon and Kim in 2021, Dalpati et al. In 2022, and a couple more of systematic reviews which are relevant to this topic. And as I move on with my slides, I will mostly be focusing on the effect of yoga and mind-body interventions, or MBIs, by which I mean a plethora of other different interventions ranging from mindfulness, meditation, tai chi, qigong, and so on and so forth, which can have an effect not just on the healthy population, as well as I will be touching upon the clinical cohort based evidence which has been published till now. So, in a nutshell, if we say how yoga actually results in immunomodulation, then I have adopted this workflow, this flow diagram from Mahajan's details published in 2014, which says that around three major pathways are responsible for the effects of yogic immunomodulation. The first being genetic pathways, which result in upregulation of anti-apoptotic genes and so on. Then there are the effects on the innate and adaptive immune system. And finally, it is through the modulation of stress response. Now, the first piece of evidence that I would like to discuss is a systematic review and meta-analysis of the effect of at least 4 weeks of mind-body intervention on the markers of inflammation and antiviral-related immune responses that was published by Morgan et al. In 2014. So what the authors have done in this systematic review is that they have searched a multiple of different articles which they screened according to their search strategy, and then they finally pooled evidence from 34 unique studies which were published in 39 articles, and it covered in more than 2,000 participants. As per the reported pooled evidence, 7 to 16 weeks of undertaking mind-body intervention moderately reduced the levels of acute phase inflammatory protein, the C-reactive protein, as can be seen on the slide on the leftmost lower corner. You can see that the C-reactive protein goes down, and this effect size is moderate in nature. A small, although not statistically significant, decrease in IL-6 or the pro-inflammatory interleukin IL-6 was also observed. However, authors did not find any significant effect in any of the remaining markers of inflammation, like for example the TNF-alpha or the CD4 counts, the natural killer cell counts, etc. So, as we can see from this evidence that up till 2013, which was the last year of their search, there was very limited evidence from high quality studies that indicated a significant effect of mind-body therapies on immune response in healthy adults as well as patient population. But as newer evidence started coming up, Munoz and Vergara et al. Published another systematic review in 2023, and here they have taken different mind-body therapies, which they have termed as mind-body movement therapies, and they have included yoga, Qigong, Tai Chi, mind-body based stress reduction intervention as well as dance therapy, and the population they have restricted to only healthy adults. And as you can see from the forest plots of this systematic review, which I have shown on my slide here, that there is a significant decrease in C-reactive protein with use of mind-body movement therapies, and similarly there is a smaller albeit significant decrease in TNF-alpha. However, if you look at the IL-6 levels, the result, there is a decrease, but it is still not very significant. So, what the authors here have concluded is that there is significant heterogeneity in the different parameters of the interventions that the included studies have looked at, and hence they have called for carefully controlled studies and for standardization of MBI parameters to allow cross-intervention comparability. Similarly, another systematic review by the Lee et al. 2023 has looked at the effect of breathing exercises in healthy population as well as patients suffering from COPD, hypertension, and diabetes mellitus. And as you can see from the forest plots shown on this slide, breathing exercises actually increase the levels of superoxide dismutase and glutathione, which have antioxidant effects in the body, and the levels of MDA, which is actually an oxidation product reflecting oxidative stress status in the body, decreases. Thus, breathing exercises are also beneficial in redox regulation of the immune system. And finally, to conclude, how exactly does the mechanism of action work for yoga? So, the exposure to daily life stressors, as we have seen in this image on this slide actually leads to a chronic low-grade systemic inflammation, and the levels of circulating inflammatory markers like C-reactive protein, IL-6 and interferon gamma increase, and this is actually counteracted by undertaking yoga and MBI. Hence, it can be expected that a regular practice of yoga and MBI would actually be beneficial. But can we now conclude that the evidence is confirmatory? Unfortunately, that's not true, because the published evidence till date has multiple gaps and is filled with multiple flaws. So before any definitive evidence-based guidelines can be made, it is imperative that research, further high-quality research, be conducted. So I just want to give an overview of what gaps have been present in the yoga research till date, particularly with regards to immune function. So in this slide, I have shown one of the earliest RCTs conducted in yoga, which was in 1975 by Patel and North. And if you look at it, the first RCT just included a sample size of only 34 participants, which is obviously too less. Since then, the number of publications has increased many folds. However, many of the original issues still persist to date. One of the recent articles by Gupta and Dhawan in 2022 reviews the methodological issues conducting in yoga and meditation-based research, and this is also true for the evidence of yoga and MBI in immune response. First and foremost is the lack of a consensus definition of yoga and MBI, and also high heterogeneity in the intervention parameters. For example, the duration of the intervention, the duration of follow-up, the duration of each session. There are such multiple parameters, and all the different studies conduct their own protocols, and there is no common ground. So it's very difficult to finally actually meta-analyze and come up with any pooled evidence. This is even compounded by the poor reporting and inadequate description of study design of the published studies, as well as the published studies fail to detail the intervention and participant characteristics. Moving on with the methodological limitations, although we have many epidemiological observational studies and even RCTs demonstrating an association, we still do not have comparable amount of research undertaken to substantiate the mechanistic evidence or the pathophysiological mechanism through which actually yoga works, through which immune effects of yoga are actually mediated. Furthermore, because these studies have a very small sample size, as was the case in the first RCT that I showed in my previous slide, the same is true today, and often the studies do not have a formal sample size calculation. This kind of precludes any accurate hypothesis testing, and this might be because researchers find it difficult to recruit and the participants and keep them from loss to follow up and prevention of attrition. So this kind of underscores why we have such limited data on long-term adherence and follow-up, as well as the validity issues with outcome measures, problems in choosing appropriate control groups, especially active control groups, like comparing with other mind-body interventions, physical exercise, and the visibility issues in blinding kind of make it difficult to have a high risk of bias in the yoga studies. For example, this systematic review published in 2015 concluded that the risk of selection bias was generally quite high in RCTs of yoga. But they were quite optimistic, and Kramer et al. Said that the situation is gradually improving. But if you look at this 2021 systematic review of RCTs of yoga on immune function, the authors clearly highlighted that among those 11 RCTs that they could find eligible for their inclusion, 3 had unclear risk of bias, which basically means that the reporting was so poor that they couldn't actually judge whether there was a risk of bias, and the rest 8 had high risk of bias. So obviously with this kind of evidence till date, it is very difficult to actually conclude with any confidence that the effects of yoga and immune function are actually what we are observing in the evidence till date. For example, another issue that has been a problem in yoga and immune function research is that we do not know about the different components of the yoga packages that are given. Most of these studies have used combined interventions, like they have combined postural exercises, breathing techniques, meditation, etc. And it has been reported, for example, by this systematic review, that combined interventions perform superior. They outperform single interventions. But unfortunately, the effect of each of these different components have hardly been researched till date. So it is very difficult when we are meta-analyzing findings and coming up with any kind of evidence-based recommendations. But one of the things, as the yoga has gained popularity, one of the things that has actually been questioned often in lay media is the safety concerns. So I just want to touch upon this aspect before concluding my presentation, that there are multiple studies which have systematically looked at the safety of yoga. For example, on this slide, I have mentioned two articles. The first on the left side you can see is a systematic review and meta-analysis of RCTs conducted in yoga, and they conclude that the findings indicate that yoga appears to be as safe as usual care and exercise. However, Kramer et al. Do say that adequate reporting of adverse events and safety data is necessary in future RCTs. On my right side is another cross-sectional study which was conducted among German yoga practitioners, and despite a few reported adverse events in this survey data, yoga appears to be safe or safer as per the authors when compared to other exercise types. So I would now like to conclude my presentation with the hope that in the future, yoga research actually becomes better and best, and there are significant improvements in the quality and not just the quantity. Thank you everyone for your patient listening, and I'm really sorry that I'm not there in person to indulge in an interactive discussion. Thank you everyone. Have a good day.
That was a very concise presentation. You will agree with me. It shows the effect of yoga and immunomodulation, and it nicely described the problems of yogic research, which, as many of you attempting to do research in this direction would have already known. Dr. Devasena, do we have time for questions, or we just wind up the session?
Yes.
So, since we're already behind time, and there's a far more interesting session coming up, because there's going to be a session on EEG perspective, and Sriamsa's EEG is going to be discussed, which I'm looking forward to. I'll say a big thank you to all of you who have been very patient, and I hope you have now a concise understanding of the effect of yoga and its effect on the human body.